We're constantly seeking that, meanwhile missing out on the essence of who we truly are.
Now, we were just talking about sort of shame in understanding the sort of psychodynamics of it, but let's understand the part that's toughest for most of us, which is the emotional piece.
In fact, we're going to talk about shame today, shame and sex and money.
Then, of course, we need something to cool us out. Really excited about
Oh
this.
my gosh.
Yes.
Carlos.
Yes.
And one of the things I love so much about you is you're a yes person.
Yes, I am.
Like me. Yes. Yes.
The truth is, and this, I'm sorry how it lands, but there's a real truth to it, so I can say it.
It's the Get Naked podcast.
Yeah. I mean, we don't end up in relationships like that.
Hello, my name is Katrina Moseley, and I am the founder of Awake and Fit, a movement for women, empowering you to strip away the lies, the limitations, the lack that we carried unnecessarily with us in this life. I am honored to be sitting here today with the Dr. Carlos Garcia. He's a good friend of mine, and this is the first time we've ever gotten to sit down together.
Yeah.
So before we hit the stage on May 31st as co-speakers, I wanted to have this time with you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this is a new concept on air. We're going to get naked today.
Awesome.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we're all going to keep our clothes on. But when we talk about getting naked, we really talk about stripping down, stripping the identities. And that's why you're here today, because you're Dr. Carlos Garcia. And why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became Dr. Carlos Garcia?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I'll give you this sort of short version of that. So came to this country as an immigrant with my parents from Cuba when I was 2, grew up in Miami, Florida. Great place to grow up, by the way. Coming out of high school, I was sort of unsure about what my next path was going to be. But I did know that I wanted to serve in the military to be able to repay the country for the freedom that I gave my family. So right after high school, I joined the United States Marine Corps. And then after my military time, I transitioned into work as a fireman and a paramedic. And then after about 7 years of doing that, I decided that I wanted to go back to school and get my degree in psychology. I'd always been fascinated by human behavior and just what makes us function. But the other part of that was really, truly wanting to understand myself at a much deeper level. We'll probably get into this a little bit later on, but I struggled with anxiety and depression for a lot of years of my life. And therapy was one of those places where I really found myself and stripped away a lot of the conditioning, the programming. And I remember saying to myself, wow, if I can do this for just one other person, then this is what I want to do with my life. And once I got to grad school, I was like, oh yeah, I'm home. This is what I was supposed to do, right? All of this other stuff was just a vehicle to get me there. So I studied psychology and human behavior, and so I've been doing that for the last 10 years, have my own practice, and so I get to work with folks now in both a counseling and a coaching capacity to help them do the same.
I love that. So the drive was big for you to get to know yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what the essence of Awake and Fit is. I don't have their answers. They do. Right. And it is getting to know thyself that truly sets thyself free. So what are we setting ourselves free from? Because I know my journey has kind of been, but would you talk a little bit about what you found, the false identities, the limitations?
Yeah. So, oftentimes we, in both conscious and unconscious ways, get so programmed by our environments, especially those early environments, our homes, our schools, our teachers, and just culture at large, right? Now, what our field of psychology has often done is led the general public to believe that we should only be concerned with like the major traumas in our lives, right? And the impacts that those have. But I'll help folks and you sort of understand it from a different lens, right? And I'll do that with a little story.
I love this.
Okay.
I love stories. So
Wonderful.
thank you.
Yeah. So this is the story of this small child going out to eat with their parents. Okay. And they go out to eat every Friday. And this child's like 6 or 7 years old. And on this particular Friday, the parents tell the child, we're going to let you choose what you want to eat. So the child obviously gets super excited, right? Like, finally, I get to make some of my own choices. So they get to the restaurant, Katrina, and the child opens the menu and sees this big, delicious, cheesy pizza and says, I want the pizza. And right in that moment, mom just sort of checks in and says, honey, are you sure? Why don't you get the burger? That's what you always get. So that child stops and thinks about it for a moment, but sticks to their decision. No, the pizza. And then, some of us had moms that were a little bit overbearing, right? Or just wanted to be very motherly, however you want to describe that nature of being. But mom checks in again. Honey, what if you don't like the pizza? The burger's the safe bet. So the child stops and thinks one more time, but sticks to their guns, the pizza. And right in that moment, the other parent chimes in. We're not getting the pizza. It's too big. You're not going to eat it all. It's going to be a waste of money. And the child says, okay, I'll get the burger. And they go on about their Friday night dinner. But my question to you is, in that moment, what does that child believe about their ability to make choices? Right? They received a very unconscious or maybe very direct message that your choices are not okay, that you don't make good choices, or that you need to check with other people before you make choices, right?
You don't have the power to stick through with the choice that really felt right for you.
Yeah.
Right for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we know about parenting is that it's pretty consistent over time.
Sure.
So we know that child probably heard a similar message around food most of the time, academics, sports, right? Like most of the things that they did. Now, this isn't to put anything on the parents. They're just doing it from a very loving place.
Yeah.
Right? But do you imagine, Katrina, over time, this child starts to develop a little bit of second guessing?
Of course.
Some self-doubt around their feelings, decisions, choices. Yeah. Do you think over time, if this is a message that's consistently reinforced, it impacts their self-esteem in any way?
Of course.
Yeah. The kinds of risks they're going to take. Yeah. Do you imagine it's going to impact the kind of friends they navigate to?
Absolutely.
And pull into their lives, the kind of relationships they're going to get into later on in life.
The relationship aspect is huge.
Yeah. But if you ask this child, and they have never investigated their past, they will tell you, I had a great childhood. I don't know why I have such a hard time making decisions. There must be something wrong with me.
There must be something wrong with me. Yeah.
And so for a lot of us, we have these early programmings from what I call, maybe there were traumas, but sometimes just like these critical moments, these critical experiences that we had that unconsciously sort of wired how we came to view ourselves, others, or the world.
Sure.
Right.
The meaning we made.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
The meaning.
And so, like, if I have some kind of fear or anxiety later on in life about making choices, I help people understand you didn't come into the world with that. Where can we pinpoint where this became a thing for you? That's the kind of programming that I'm helping folks try to break in their own lives.
Because when you can see the programming and you can see the patterns, then you can break and create. And similar what we're doing in Awaken Fit with women.
Yeah.
And you'll only know the pattern and the programming. It's beautiful that you can guide people to do that. But that is a very intimate knowing within self. But sometimes you don't know.
Sure.
And so you can get lost in the idea there is something wrong with me because I didn't have a major trauma, right? To your point, there are people out there who had great childhoods. Conversely, there are also people out there who had really challenging childhoods, like I did.
Yeah.
and similarly made meaning and second guessed and self-doubt. So very similar ideology that began programming to question everything that we do.
Totally.
Until we don't know who we are anymore.
Yeah.
And so
We're
both
so
of
lost.
us, are in the same space of, well, then how do we get back to that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we return to the remembering of what's true?
Yeah.
Oh,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the to me, to have someone walk alongside of you
Mm-hmm.
while you're in that journey is what we're both sitting here for today. So if you're listening to this, I want to invite you to stay with us for a little bit, because if something we've said resonated with you, we are going to go deeper into maybe some things you haven't heard spoken about before, because in the essence of Get Naked, there's no shame. In fact, we're going to talk about shame today, shame and sex and money.
Yeah.
But continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. So you just talking about it now, shame, right? So let's talk about
Let's go into
that.
shame.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love shame.
Yeah.
I don't love shame,
it's
but
the Get Naked podcast. Let's
this is
talk
the Get
about
Naked
the
podcast.
thing that,
Okay, this is
that
good.
often prevents us from getting naked, which is the shame, right?
Okay, so we just right?
Yeah.
So any women who are listening,
Yeah.
let's just talk for a second about the unconscious.
Yeah.
We may not know that there's shame associated with sex, but maybe we're not having sex with our husbands in our 30s and 40s, so when we're primed to great libido. Are we allowed to be talking about this? Okay, great. We're going to kicked off air. So pinpointing that there's been some programming and some shame attached to sexuality.
Yeah.
Could help you, could help a woman. So then I'd like to also address may I tell a story about shame and sex?
Please.
Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my first encounter with sexuality was when I was 5 years old. And, at 5 years old, I should have been playing and having fun. And very early on, I learned two things about sex: secrecy and shame. But I didn't know. I didn't know what those things were. But fear. I would say three things: fear, fear, fear. So how those showed up later in life for me was that idea that we've spoken about. There's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And if there's something wrong with me, then that must mean there's a fix in the world for me. So what is that? And all you need to do is think it, and Instagram or Facebook will sell it to you. So that led to a rabbit hole down coaching around femininity, finding my divine goddess, but also around supplements and hormone therapy. And things would work for a little bit, but they wouldn't last. Yeah. So talk to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah. So, just for those listening in, I often talk about the optimal environments that we should have had for our development psychologically and emotionally, right? So anything that's outside of the optimal, whether it was a critical event or a major trauma, know that all of those things are just kind of ripples in the pool that lead to our development later on. But let's talk about this idea of shame just from its sort of grounds, core, existence, right? And how it comes to be. So if you think about the day we first come into the world, right? And we're held by our parents and our guardians, and we're given love, and what a beautiful child, and right? And we didn't have to do anything to earn it. Right? It's our first experience with unconditional love. And for a lot of us, our last.
Oh, yes.
Because in the service of our parents raising us, socializing us, they started to give us a model of how we needed to be, right? And as long as you met that model and met that framework, as long as you behaved, ate your broccoli, you got a message about yourself, a very reinforcing message, right? Atta girl, good boy, you're so well behaved. And that came with this feeling of like love, connection, which at our core is what we want to experience, especially as babies and as young children, right? It's the thing that feels safest to us in our environment. Now, if we weren't meeting that model that was given to us, the message that we received wasn't neutral, was it, Katrina?
It was not neutral.
It was not neutral.
Very negative.
Very negative.
Yeah.
Right. I grew up in the era of spanking, right? Like, but maybe it was a timeout. Maybe it was a criticism. Maybe it was a judgment. Maybe it was the withdrawal of love from a
Withdrawal
parent.
of love,
Right.
The emotional unavailability.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that felt like a deep disconnection as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So we made sure not to do anything that would put us in that kind of situation. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's one level at which we start to develop a sense of shame, because when we are not acting as we were asked to act or to behave, and, if there was rigid rules at home, then those were the rigid rules you had to meet. So when you weren't meeting the rules, you were bad. You were,
yeah.
right? And so, of course, we didn't want to feel that, because what came with that was this withdrawal of love. Mm-hmm. So a lot of us internalized and started to program ourselves with this deep sense of shame as I'm not worthy. Right?
The I'm not enough voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so throughout, right, I mean, then we get put into school around the age of 4 or 5, and we're told to be the absolute best, be the best at math, be the fastest runner, right? And so our whole lives, we're constantly seeking this better version, this idealized version of ourselves, because we believe that that's the thing that's going to make us feel good about ourselves.
It's the chase.
Anytime that we're falling even a little short of it, what we experience is that, shameful, I'm not enough, guilt, what's wrong with me, I must be bad, core belief, right? And again,
because it was reinforced
over
and over. And
we
so
don't
it
come
becomes
into the world with it.
Of course, right.
Right? Like, you never see a child learning how to walk and after they've fallen on the 5th time be like, I'm so stupid, I'll never figure this out.
Right.
We're not wired that way.
Right.
So this was all programming from parents, schools, society. This programming that a lot of us, even today as adults, are stuck in. You were talking about all of the ways that you tried to find that love in potions, supplements, right? The self-help industry, we spent $13.2 billion just last year in the US on self-help.
So can we pause there for a second? Because I love that you just addressed this up. We're not here to bash the self-help industry by any means. But what I've seen, and I've been in the self-help industry, I've spent a lot of money there.
So have I.
We have very similar stories.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of magic. It's a lot of the believing the illusion that this will help. And is there such thing as self-help?
Yeah. So I love that you led with that. We're not trying to bash it. Throughout that process of me working on myself, there was brilliant things that I learned. Lots of good things and lots of things that weren't helpful, that led, down alleys that, where there was nothing. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is if it was effective, we wouldn't be coming back to it over and over and over again.
So
we're not finding ultimately what we think we're going to find there.
Correct, because it's not out there. It's not.
Right.
And anything that does lead you within, his teachings, his coaching, his work, the community of Awaken Fit, both of us are leading, teaching towards healing. Mm-hmm. And that's today's episode is really about the return to healing through the journey of shame, recognizing it, guilt, I am bad, the cultural identity that you need to be good to fit somewhere, or there's always this place you could be better. And so we're constantly seeking that, meanwhile missing out on the essence of who we truly are. Yeah. And that's just when you get naked with that. It's really fun, isn't it?
Totally.
Like when you find out who you are and it's all within.
So liberating.
So when we go in and we are able to express or find, whether we have a counselor who helps us or we're in a community of women exploring that, when we find that there's shame, do you find it's very necessary that process happen, that we tie it to an event that happened to remove it?
So I'll say two things here. I think people get stuck in what's the event,
I agree.
And oftentimes it wasn't one singular event.
I
It was
agree.
a series of patterns or a series of messages over time that we sort of took away, right? Now, we were just talking about sort of shame in understanding the sort of psychodynamics of it, but let's understand the part that's toughest for most of us, which is
Yeah.
the emotional piece.
Yeah.
Shame feels excruciatingly painful.
Let's talk to our audience.
Yeah.
You have felt a lot of shame.
Oh,
I have felt a lot
yeah.
of shame.
Yeah.
Aside from feeling it in our
Yeah.
body, it's one of those, for me, it was, I couldn't escape it. Oh, I see your eyes. Yeah. Have you, I couldn't escape it. There was nothing I could get it off of me.
Right.
We'll talk
Yeah.
about that piece.
So let's talk about how most of us learned how to navigate emotions. Right. Yeah.
We learned.
Yeah. Well, how we,
yeah.
yeah.
The process of,
Right.
no, let's see. You're 70s, baby, correct?
Yeah.
We're naked. We're getting naked. So
yeah,
I'm 45. I'll
yeah,
be 46 in August.
Yeah, I'm 47.
Oh,
Yeah,
see, when we were raised in the
totally
latchkey kids.
right. So
Emotions.
the message for most of us, well, for me as a Hispanic man in a Hispanic
Oh,
household was, no tears. That's not allowed. That's weakness. Grow up. All of that message. But what I find for most people is it was some variation of that. If you're feeling sad, disappointed, frustrated, angry, shameful, there was this like, hey, suck it up, kid. Right? And so, again, we learned that this version of me is not allowed. So I shouldn't feel okay. Like the world is giving me this very clear message that being sad or feeling upset or, disappointed is not okay. So let me just suck it up. Now, the other version of that is people will tell me, well, like, no, my parents never did that. My parents were very positive about it. Okay, let's go down that road. Right. And then the message usually was like, if you were upset or again, feeling ashamed or disappointed, it was like, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. There's no reason to be sad.
Or let's replace it. Like, let's buy something.
Yeah.
Let's give you something.
Let's get you out of this
reward
space.
it.
Yes.
Let's change it.
Let's change it.
Let's change it.
Right. So either way.
Right. Don't feel it or change it.
Or change it.
Yeah.
And what it did for most of us is it robbed us of the opportunity to know how to navigate these emotions.
So we have a bunch of grown-up adults from the 70s. Also, can I say we're not bashing our parents either because mom and dad, they all did, right? You taught us what you knew. Yeah. And so thank you for teaching us that. But
we grow up and we're terrified of feeling anything short of okay and happy all the time.
Or then when we get to adulthood, we have that feeling and it's change it or suppress it. So it's never sit with it and heal it.
Or drink or smoke.
Oh, well, that's it. Change it.
Right?
Like then we
whatever
drink, smoke, scroll. I mean, come on. I've tried them all. So this is we are grown-up adults learning how to navigate the emotional storehouse.
Right.
Because now we have these collective emotional experiences that we didn't know how to face, approach, how would it be another way of saying that?
Yeah.
Navigate through to feel it.
Totally. Totally.
There's an interesting, I'm going to bring up the Bible for a second. In the Beatitudes, Jesus says on the Sermon on the Mount that, I'm paraphrasing, so if I screw the Bible up, Scientology. So I just inquire because it's get naked. Like, let's be transparent here. Let's not hide things anymore because that robs you and I of the real experience that we could have. And so I sat down at the Scientology table and really wanted to, for myself, get naked of all the thoughts I've had about these people.
Beautiful.
But it was very interesting because they had a stress test there. And I was very familiar with the idea of testing frequency. You were just touching my hand before this and you said you could feel my energy. I credit that to the work that you and I have been able to do over the last decade or longer. So they handed me these rods. And she just very vaguely said, I want you to think about a person or a situation. And I thought of my daughter, and I adore my daughter. And she goes, oh, yeah, you're stressed. Now, I didn't tell her I thought about my daughter. And she goes, oh, yeah, you're stressed. And I go, how can you tell? She goes, oh, it flipped all the way to the right. I said, so what's it measuring? She goes, your stress. So I just at that point said, so tell me, how long have you been a Scientologist? And is this measuring frequency? Is this a SIRA testing? And once I got there, she knew that I knew a little bit more. So she wanted me to read Dianetics. And I asked her, instead of reading the book, could you share with me some of your philosophies? And they actually shared a lot of things that I believe in. So one, we're spiritual beings.
Sure.
Wholeheartedly. Two, what was her second? I don't remember, but I was vaguely, she lost me at 3. But she was open to reading the Course in Miracles, and which I thought was very admirable.
Sure.
But I'll leave it at there that I did get tested for stress. I was not stressed, and that was brought up because you were holding and could feel my vibration. And I think it's beautiful that we can acknowledge this, that we are energetic beings. We're not, or energy beings, that we have not just this physical body. And that's the naked part, right? We tend to think that when we talk about getting naked, it's the physicality. But what we're talking about with getting naked is the spirituality. We're spiritual beings. We have spiritual bodies. We have many bodies. And we tend to forget that because we get lost in the layers of these false identities, of the programming. Before we went to break, we were talking about there's a critical mass point when you begin, and maybe it's in your 40s, women, maybe it's because we're latchkey kids, that you go through the I need to be fixed, and we look for the supplements and the coaches and the doctors, the expensive fixes, and they work for a little bit and then stop working, to the point of I really want to do something about this, because what I'm continuing to experience, be it in my money, be it in my marriage, be it in my relationships, or with self, my child, right? Any of that, I don't want to do this anymore. And unfortunately, suicide is a really growing trend in our culture for people wanting to get out. So if you're listening to this today and you've had a suicidal thought, first of all, I want to say I acknowledge you. Second of all, I lost my grandmother to suicide at 76 years old, a very brilliant woman. And I now at 45, I can understand that, wanting to get out in a culture where people aren't telling the truth, where there is, back then for her, there wasn't a safe outlet like this. There wasn't a Get Naked podcast where we could say the things that people are not speaking to keep people feeling like they're alone. And first of all, I want to say you're never alone. And second of all, there is another way. And the way that Dr. Carlos and I are suggesting is that's to go within. And from all the patterning that you've discussed from childhood, right? We picked up these ideas on who we weren't, who we are, who we weren't, the meaning we made. And then we ran with these unconscious programming until it was, oh my God, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And to me, that's why I began Awaken Fit, because I don't step in, but this is what the community is for, is what's next after, oh my God, how did I get here?
Right.
Well, we've said it's not an easy road. It's actually kind of a brutal road because there's a waking up. And you and I have taken similar waking up paths. So let's go there. Yeah. And you just got back from 10 days of silence. You know, when I saw you today, you have this emerging radiant light. You've always been a light being, but it's extra bright today. And the impulsive free spirited person in me is like, oh, I want to go do 10 days in silence.
Yeah.
And then I remember, oh yeah, right. This is what I teach in Awake and Fit. I help women remember the essence and the importance of stillness and silence.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my guiding lights is be still and know I am. And that practice has saved me more than I know. That practice has enhanced and expanded my journey back home.
Yeah.
But that practice is something that's ever growing. And it's not an easy practice to get still or silent, because the first time you get silent, right? If meditation is the panacea for everything, then why aren't we all doing it? But Dr. Carlos, you've been 10 days in silence. So, wow.
Yeah, no, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
It was tough. And I will say, I've had a pretty consistent meditation practice for 3.5 years, sort of going into it, and it was still brutal.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong, right? I remember sort of guiding somebody through a 5-minute silent meditation in my office, and he almost had a panic attack, right? It was just like, what are all these thoughts? And so one of the things I just gently remind people is like, our brains are wired for that, to analyze, to think, right? And then we just live in a world that's constantly putting at our attention in different ways, right? And so when we try to quiet the mind, and it doesn't have a distraction, lots of things are going to rise to the surface, both pleasant and unpleasant. And when we have those unpleasant ones come to the surface, obviously we don't want to experience them. Remember what we were talking about a minute ago around emotions.
Push it away.
Right? We push it away.
Change it.
Totally. But it was.
And can we say you're not wrong? Like if you smoke that joint, you have that beer. Don't do it with guilt.
Yeah.
Because you're programmed to want to change it.
Yeah.
And until you know better.
I tell people all the time, like, fine, have that tool, use it.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Learn to use it as a support.
Yeah. What I could also tell you about the way you use that tool is that there's an inner guilt that you're experiencing, and shame, right? And so let's do it. If we're going to do it consciously. Right?
Wait, can we just go deeper on that for a second? Because I'm a former, I even hate saying this, so let's word it intentionally.
Yeah.
I drank a lot of alcohol excessively for a number of years, and I don't brag about that, but this is the way I want to speak about it from now on, because the world tried to tell me I was an alcoholic, and that never made sense to me. I was a programmed lost being. I didn't know who I was. And so I chose alcohol to repetitively take me out of the constant feeling of I didn't want to be inside of me.
Of course. I mean, Katrina, I don't blame anyone for using anything
me
as a
either.
coping strategy.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Like, here's the thing that the world has such a hang up with addiction and such a focus on it. Yeah. Even well-meaning people who are in the world teaching about addiction right now. I had a healer yesterday tell me, we're here to bring awareness to addiction. And I suggested, what if we don't bring awareness to it any longer? What if we brought awareness to the return to love and the walking away from the fact that we were bad. And so we keep reinforcing that within ourselves. And so we continue to choose the thing that reinforces that for us, even when it's harmful. Yeah. So that's what you talk
addiction,
about being.
We've made it to be this thing that becomes an identity. Addiction is just a symptom.
Can we say that a little louder?
Yeah. Addiction is an identity.
Is a symptom,
it's a symptom
that we have been confused.
That we feel disconnected.
Yeah. And we don't know how to comfort.
Right.
Or be with what is we are experiencing.
Right. Because what most of us have learned to do is to harshly criticize ourselves, beat ourselves up, lash ourselves, right? And whenever we're pushing
the judge, the juror, the executor,
all of that, which, by the way, puts the brain into a heightened state of arousal, fight or flight, creating more tension, which is why part of the reason why addictions is so hard to break. I saw this really cool video not too long ago And essentially it showed a baby crying, right? Probably like a 6 or 7 month old. And then it showed the mother just resting her head on the baby's leg, not comforting just being in the vicinity, physical touch.
Touch, right?
And you watch the baby in a matter of 15 seconds stop crying, calming itself, and eventually taking this deep breath and just that. That's the return to connection.
Yes.
That's the return home. That's what a lot of us that are caught up in addictions are looking for.
You just nailed it. We're looking for the deep sigh, because in that early programming, when we learn to put all of the layers on to protect ourselves from the experience that feels so negative and keeps reinforcing we're bad, we're holding our breath, because we believe now, not only are we bad,
Yeah.
it's dangerous out there.
Yeah.
So that collective sigh, which both you and I on our journeys, interestingly enough, we didn't know each other when we began these journeys. Right. We found each other. Your vibe attracts your tribe, people.
Yeah.
And breathing, the breath in our lungs, the very free thing, the thing that we don't have to work anything for. It just beats. The force keeps it, the source keeps it beating. And yet you and I have both learned to use it as a tool. And in our Awake and Fit community, in our Fit 15 mornings, every morning we begin in breath as an anchor, because, as you just said, I won't be able to touch them, or maybe they're not going to have connection. I do have a lot of single women in my program right now. But that sigh can be your return back to that connection piece, even momentarily, to take you out of the anxiety, to relieve you of the depression. So breath, the very thing that's free
been there the whole
for
time.
All. It's been there the whole time. Yeah.
And the breath is a really good way to regulate the nervous system. I often talk about, obviously with a background as a psychologist, about what's going on in the mind, right? But you talked about these different, right? The spiritual body and the mental body. And so we need to understand what's going on a just programming level as well. Sometimes when we've been through adverse events and traumas, we don't only store that in our memories, we store that in our body as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes it can, just depending on the way you want to describe it, but it gets trapped in the body in these different ways, because I'll take fear, for example, right? And so fear will get trapped in the body when we experience these just high fight or flight responses in our lives that we weren't able to unwind or to process or to work through. And so if our bodies are in a constant state of tension and hyperarousal, then of course we need something to cool us out, right? To bring us back to a place of just loosening. And so, we live in a consumerist society. So cigarettes, beer, scrolling, food, and sometimes even things that we think that are healthy that might not be so healthy for us. But the breath is that one anchor, right? That we always have access to, and that if we learn to use as a tool is just the greatest regulator.
Yeah, right? So I call it in the Awake and Fit community. It's your tool for what's next. Right. It's your tool to anchor you in the moment. It's your tool that sometimes can powerfully be used to recognize and remember, oh, wait, I don't have to respond the way that I keep responding, because, right, that conditioning and that programming doesn't just affect us.
Sure.
Now, you said it's showing up in our marriages. Yeah. So the unhappy marriage, right? Yeah. And how we can change that is, take it from me, not changing him. Doesn't work that way. I tried 22 years, but really recognizing, oh, right. I'm constantly going in expecting a different result when I'm responding the same way every time.
Yeah. So, love everything you said there, right? I practice or sort of study a lot of Buddhist philosophy, and part of this retreat was my deepening of that philosophy, which essentially, part of Buddha's words is like we create our own suffering,
Sure.
right? Every day that you wake up and expect things to be other than how they are, you're creating internal tension and suffering in your mind.
And another way of saying that, absolutely, is when you need the world to be okay for you to be okay, there's your indication that maybe it's time, an invitation to look within.
Right.
And that's not a shame.
Right.
That's not a shame.
At all.
It's an invitation. It's a
Yeah.
gentle invitation to
Yeah.
maybe I don't have to do this anymore, and maybe I have. That's a pretty radical thought for maybe some listening, that I'm the creator of my suffering. I've heard a lot of people fight back against that because then they have well, what about? What about? What about?
Right.
But
And the what about often is, how are other people reacting? How are other people treating me? So, yes. And I, like you, for years, spent an inordinate amount of time and energy trying to change everybody in my environment and my environment.
That's why we love each other. I mean, we really
it really
got good
took me a
this.
while to recognize, oh, okay, well, even if I can change a few people, or even if I can get people to be who I need them to be, there's still like billions of other people out there that I have zero control over how I change. And the inevitability that life is also, constantly doing things I don't want it to do, right? And so it's like, what if I could go inward and change what my reaction is? Right. And so that's where I think the meditation has really helped me over the years, is I no longer have to be reactive to the way things and people are being in my world. I can choose my response by seeing, what is the thing in me? Why do I get frustrated by that? I'll give you a perfect example, right? I, for whatever number of reasons, being the military, the way that I'm wired, I'm the kind of person that likes to get things done, right? Like, let's move. We have an objective. When I get up in the morning, let's go. When we get to the store, let's get out of the car. Let's get the groceries. Let's get home.
It's just another thing you and I share in common. Yeah. Do it now. Do it fast.
I have the wonderful sort of just blessing of having married somebody that's the opposite. We're taking our time. What's the rush? Right. And so there are countless times where we get to the grocery store and I'm out of the car and ready to go. And she's just, she's got to fix the thing, and then she's got to get the toy for my son, and like 5 minutes. Right. And I'm like, come on, Grandma, like, can we go already? Now, this is a small example, right? Like,
and he means Grandma so lovingly.
Yeah, in such a loving way, right? Because this used to be my grandma, right? When I used to take her around. And I recognized, like, oh, I can ask my partner to move faster, and right.
Or you can also slow down.
Yeah, I can also slow down. And so what I started doing is, like, when that reactivity would arise in me, where I was just like, it's like, where's that coming from, Carlos?
Oh, wait, that was such a profound question. Introspection.
Yeah.
We also practice that in the Awaken Fit community,
like owning
every morning.
My reaction. She's just being who God made her to be. She's not like trying to do it to upset me. So where is my reaction coming from, and why is that there?
Well, and I would say too, she's your teacher in that moment, that she's going at the pace she needs to go at to allow you the space to ask the question.
Right.
And when we can begin to shift, right? You and I have studied A Course in Miracles, and the miracle is not the doing. It's not the physicality. The miracle is the perception change. Yeah. You experienced a miracle there when you were able to say, I have two options here, right? The creator of my suffering, I can sit and have these thoughts. Could you just hurry up? And I mean, my gosh, how many times have we had this with our spouse? We want them to do something differently than what they're doing in the moment.
Right.
And it creates this tension within us, but it's within us.
It's within us.
It's not within them. However, I will say we've discussed multiple bodies, and our thought waves do impact the others.
Yeah.
So I love that the question
Yeah.
for you is, where's this arising from, this need to go so fast that I'm missing this moment or needing her to do something different so that I will be okay? But listen, that's not a rare thought. That's
Why
a
am I not
calm.
okay?
Yeah.
And why do I need someone
Why
outside
is
of
there
me
so
to
much
make me
pressure in
right?
me? Yes. Why do I feel like I'm going to boil over and
Right.
spill out and I'm now angry?
Right. And so let's say I haven't arrived at the level of angry, but I'm somewhat perturbed. Let's just say
there are
there's a
varying
slight,
degrees of anger.
there's a slight agitation in my body.
And there's a huge emotional wheel.
That's going to, right? And so
Yeah.
now when she meets me to walk,
Right.
she's sensing that.
Because it's your energy.
Right.
It's your vibration now.
And now she's feeling like, oh, wait a second, this
Mhm.
doesn't feel right. And so
Right. And something that I learned in my own marriage, right? Trying to change it for so long. Again, he wasn't doing anything that I thought was okay. So I tried to make him okay. But I would constantly say to him, I feel disconnected from you. I don't feel a connection. And I didn't have the words until in my own exploration to say the energetic resonance. We're not energizing together. Oh, wait, probably because I am operating from a very low vibrational space in those very low emotional storehouses that I learned very early on, and I haven't allowed to heal so that I can feel something differently, which has been huge for me to remember that as much as I chose suffering, I can choose love. And therein lies the miracle, the change in perception. And now it becomes about the practice. Interestingly enough, you own something called a practice.
Right.
And I have a community where this is what we do. So I think this word is very profound as we begin to talk about shedding shame, stripping shame, stripping guilt. And when I say that, I don't want to falsely lead people to think that we can get rid of it, right?
Guilt is necessary.
Okay, sure.
Right.
So can we talk about why?
It's a guide. I mean, but every emotion is. So is anger.
Oh.
So is grief. So is sadness.
Fear.
So is fear.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of us have gotten into this sort of mindset of like, oh, I need to eliminate all fear, all guilt, or all shame. Good luck with that. It's not going to happen. You're a human being.
Yeah,
right?
fear's always going to be a part.
We can learn to have a different relationship with it, right? One that's not feeling toxic, or one that's not moving us into a space of disconnection, but more connection, right? So one of the things that I love to do when I give my talks is, I'll ask this ridiculous question, and it's purposely ridiculous, right?
Okay.
And so when I'm talking about emotions, I'll say, please raise your hand if you've managed to get to where you are in this point in your life without ever failing. Right. And obviously people chuckle, right? Oh, so everyone's failed?
Yeah.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah.
Me too. Wait, hundreds of times? Okay. Right. So now we're stripping away the shame. Then I'll ask, is there anyone in this room, please raise your hand if you've ever experienced sadness?
Yeah.
Everyone raises their hand. Guilt. Everyone raises their hand. Disappointment. Everyone raises their shame. Oh, so this is the thing that connects us all.
Oh, this is the collective shared experience.
And now, with that getting naked in the room,
yes,
can we now have a conversation about what's important for us? Can we remove the shame since we're all the same here?
Yeah.
So it's not about removing these things from our lives. It's about connecting with them in a loving, compassionate way.
Oh, and connecting with them is your connection with yourself, recognizing and returning to, wait a minute, I was never bad.
Right.
I ran with a story that I was, and releasing, forgiving, atoning, I would even say, the undoing, the messaging that might have arrived from, and like your wife's story, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing them therefore as teachers. Right. So in the case of your wife, In that moment, she becomes the teacher that allows the space for you to ask the question, do I really want to keep feeling like this? And your answer was no. And so you, at that point, decided I can either go back or I no longer have the same response.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you bring up this concept of the teacher, because I'll tell you what I think one of the biggest shifts for me internally has been that has allowed me to start living a life of more peace and more fulfillment and, in a way, more empowerment, although I don't think that was the objective. And that's that when I see everything in life and everybody as a teacher,
Yes,
then I don't have to walk around every day needing everything to be different because I see it as an opportunity, an invitation for me to go inward and see what in me is still getting caught up, agitated, frustrated, not wanting it a certain way. And that shift for me has brought so much joy and peace and happiness.
well, right, because you were essentially asking, why am I not at peace? If my understanding, and this is my belief, we're peaceful beings. We come into the world as peaceful, loving beings. Where did that change?
Right.
Where did we lose that? We didn't.
Right.
It's always there and always with us.
Right.
That ability to be at complete peace. But there's these things that sit on top of us from the collective experiences that didn't feel good or reinforced, the false identities, the patterns, the stories that keep getting repeated because our thoughts become our things. So hardwired minds, hardwired in either direction, are going to continue to return to us what we're hardwired for or what we're wired or thinking. So I love that proverbial question, and that's a tool that everyone can use, is a curiosity. And we began with this, how curious as we are as children, and we tend to lose that along the way. And interestingly enough, Christ says it's in spoken word to enter the gates of heaven. And we know heaven being the realm of the mind where there's peace, joy, bliss without a drug or alcohol, become childlike again. And that maybe gets falsely taught, this isn't a harsh criticism towards Western religion, but it is falsely taught. And what he meant by that, because that's to me what he means, is become curious again about what's inside of you that is that oneness. That connection to the peace, to the love that we emanated from, that we will return to.
Of course.
And that maybe our earth purpose is to return to it here so that that's what we can give. So I think of you and your wife getting out of the car and how much different that now experience is, having had you asked that question, can I slow down and be with her?
Right.
Is that what she's teaching me, to be in the present moment?
Sure.
And when you do, we both know the power of the present moment is nothing but love. When I'm powerfully present with you, I have nothing to give you but love, because I'm not here asking anything from you. And love needs nothing. Love has everything. And that's why it's giving. So I love that now you can walk into the store, and maybe not every time, which is why we talk about this being the practice, that it will return again it will return again maybe at some level, shortened periods of time. You'll have the thought again, why isn't so-and-so in a hurry? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'll share something that just came up just like a week and a half ago.
Okay.
That is me putting that into practice. Because, the first couple of times is like, oh, she's frustrating me, right? Not owning the reaction. And now when it happens, I'm like, oh, what a beautiful opportunity for me to practice being in the moment.
Miracle change in perception.
Or practice my breathing or whatever. So a couple of weeks ago, she's going through something very challenging and difficult right now.
Yeah.
And anytime any of us are, we don't have the emotional capacity or the space where, things feel harder. And so I called to check in and see how her day was going, and I can tell it wasn't going well. And so we were both quiet for a moment. I was just sort of holding space. And she said, well, okay, I'll call you later. And I can tell the agitation in her voice. Right. Now, normally I would be like, okay, this is a good opportunity. I don't want to get caught up in whatever's there. Let me just get off the phone. I was like, no, wait a second. Hey, it sounds like you're really frustrated right now. How is there anything I can sort of say or do? Is there anything I can help with at this moment? And, part of the pattern that her and I have spoken about, she grew up the youngest of four in a house where emotions weren't processed. And right. So she grew up around a lot of emotional rejection. So she learned to protect herself from that. So in that moment, I didn't feel safe to her.
Sure.
Right. And I can sense that she was trying to push me away. Now, in the past, how I've handled that is allowed her to push me away and just sort of be like, okay, fine, then I'll just talk to you later. Right. Which is my reaction. On this particular occasion, I remember thinking to myself, this pattern. You know that it's coming from a deep place of pain for her. She's not rejecting you because that's not who she is. Instead of reacting and pulling away, invitation to pull towards. And I was like,
lean in.
Yeah. I was like, Christina, I know this is feeling really hard for you. I'm sensing right now that you're pushing me away. This feels familiar, and you don't need to do that. I love you.
I just want to acknowledge on this podcast to be sitting on the sofa with a very masculine man, Navy firefighter. I have chills right now, and I want to honor and acknowledge what a breath of fresh air it is to hear men be able, and thank you for sharing that story, because if we have men listening today, it is about the work, and it's capable for this is possible.
Totally.
This love, the expression of love that you just described in this relationship, like I felt the fractures being healed. And the whole essence of today's talk is really just about healing. It's time that we focus on healing, not addiction, not generational dysfunction, not our childhood stories, not our storied self that has been a false high story, but healing. And it's a personal journey. But look at this personal story, how you and your partner who have a child together. So this child is impacted by these vibrations, expressions, emotions, experiences. Consciously, subconsciously, now your child is also part of this healing, that we don't have to repeat these patterns. He doesn't have to repeat these patterns in his relationship. But for you as a man to say, how can I help you? And I recognize this is a pattern, and neither of us are wrong.
Right.
Because we can just stop saying that. We're not wrong. Well, every experience is just an opportunity to heal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, acknowledging, here is the series of patterns that led to why you react this way. Here's the series of patterns from my own family that lead me to react this way. And in this moment, can we put that aside to see that what we're both really wanting right now is to love each other.
Connection.
And just connect.
Connection.
That's it.
It's what we're all looking for, to be connected back to our source of love.
Right.
And we use that in our culture to continue to build walls and boxes, looking for it in places where it doesn't exist when it was within us all along. And to go back to what we had spoken about earlier, we're inviting you into a journey that is for the brave, but you are brave. And this journey, there's nothing to be scared of here. It's an unveiling, it's an uncovering, but it requires some intention. It inquires that was great intention there, that you sat with that instead of responding to the old pattern and the egoic voice. It's like, she's frustrated. I'm gonna hang up now because I want to be part of that.
Right.
But that's a human conditioning, and we do that again, not wrong. But how beautiful, and thank you for sharing that, because the vibration is felt.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy for you too, because not to say there won't be other uncoverings, right? As we begin to heal, but you're committed, and she very much your teacher, like Brian has been for me. God bless them. Will be continued to be invited. And I would say about this path of awakening, that the invitation is to not fix anything anymore. There's nothing to fix. There's only an introspection. And there's a pattern here with you and I, the questioning.
Sure.
There's asking great questions of yourself will lead you to the answer. You don't need to know the answer, because the answer is within you. You just need to be willing to ask the question, and it's come full circle. Then get still and allow it.
Sure. And I do want to put something out there for the listeners, because this is often a question I get, right? And I'll preface it like I would never condone somebody staying in an unhealthy, toxic, or abusive relationship. Right.
Thank you.
So, sometimes the people in our lives, when we are in toxic relationships, there's an invitation there too. And that's either to learn boundaries, to learn self-respect, to learn, right? So often people will say, well, like, I'm in an unhealthy relationship. How long do I stay? It's not about staying or going.
There's no measurement.
Right.
We're not gonna play with our lives. If you're in a dangerous situation, if you're being beaten, abused mentally, physically, emotionally. Thank you for recognizing that.
So there's that sort of end of the spectrum. There's, what we were talking about, sort of the example I was using, my wife. But even something that came up, here recently with somebody I was speaking to, where this person sort of found themselves in the relationship. On the surface looks very loving, but they're caught up in their their dynamics that you can tell are a result of their own patternings. And this person was undergoing a lot of suffering because they were just continuing to rescue and fix, and it was causing them a lot of pain. And so the invitation is the same, which is, here you've found yourself in the same pattern again, and it's causing you a great deal of pain, asking you what it is that you need to do different. And what it's asking you to do is to, start speaking your voice, to start setting boundaries. And obviously that feels hard because it's not your default sort of way of being. But sometimes, and I say this to so many people, I've probably learned more from suffering and pain than I have from any other experience in my life.
I say that often too. Go to all the yoga classes you want, go to church every week, go to the bar and drink with your friends. That's not where the experience happens. That's not where the miracle happens. It is in the moment that we have decided is painful, that allows the awakening to invite us in to ask, is this really how I want to proceed? And the self-awareness of, I'm rescuing again. Might that mean that I want to be rescued? And then to ask that question without shame, because at some point I wanted to be rescued. So, my story is, addiction, massive, massive attraction to substances that would temporarily remove me from the feeling of wanting to escape this body and the experiences. I didn't know I wanted help. I didn't know how to ask for help. And so if I would have just asked for help, if I would have had the language, the the knowing, hey, what I'm really doing here is saying, I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable. And I want to get out of here, but I don't know how. And I need help. Because one thing I think we all know, because we come with the knowing of this, and knowing thyself is getting back to this, is we're here to help one another. So the boxes and the walls don't work.
Right.
Because that's not how we were designed. That's not the design of the intelligence, of the loving source that created us for barriers and divisions. It's this.
Yeah.
It's an invitation, as you spoke earlier with your wife, to lean in, to ask, how may I help you? In both the Bible and in A Course in Miracles, and maybe in Buddhism as well. Maybe you could speak to this. I haven't studied deeply in Buddhism, but surface. There's very much that we're here to walk one another home. The Course in Miracles says, walk twice as far as your brother asks you. And when we grow up and we feel like we have to protect ourselves, when we're living in that fight or flight, that we believe there's an attack or that we're constantly under attack. And that attack could be, we're wrong, someone's going to hurt us, we're bad, they're bad. That was my story. People are bad because I couldn't own that I thought I was bad. So I projected that onto people. But when we can when we can strip that we're under attack, then there's this soft permission to go into, to allow. I love that word too. I think that we were back into the teachings. So we'll move from, like really learning from our experiences, using what's happening.
Yeah.
Instead of judging it, right? And that's the egoic programming, is that if we just judge it, and we typically judge that which we don't know, right? So we're quick to pass a judgment on it or control it. When we can move past those two, recognize that we're beginning to judge or control it, then we can offer the space of, how can I learn? How can I grow? And how can I release this so I don't store this in my physical body, which becomes disease? And that's one of the things that I like to talk a lot about in what we're doing in the Awaken Fit community. We have a live morning Fit 15, and it's 15 minutes. And we practice the same 5 practices every morning. We do so purposely as a practice, but it's also an invitation in the safety and security of that they know what's going to happen, so they can then use that time to whatever's going to come up. Because we shared earlier, most often it's a painful experience, but once you begin down this journey, it can be being in a place of familiarity and certainty, where your body feels safe enough to take that breath, that then you are recognizing, oh wait, I still have some things that no longer serve me, and I'm ready to heal.
Yeah.
And so we're back at healing.
Yeah.
And my heart's cry is for women who feel trapped, who feel imprisoned. I talk about the imprisonment often. I used to have this irrational fear of going to prison until I woke up and recognized I was in prison, and I was living in hell. I've experienced hell, which is why I no longer believe there is a place that we could ever go and burn. Because a loving creator did not create a place for that, but the man created a space for that in this world. And burning kind of feels like living with that shame and that guilt. We laugh, and because we've just been there, right? And you learn to laugh about it on the other side. So I hope that we can offer a little bit of hope. That one time my husband so eloquently said to me, and he said it as though he knew, and I believed him, it's going to be more beautiful than you can ever imagine. And he's been right. He has been right. It hasn't been easy, this journey.
Sure.
Which is why you and I are going to share the stage at the end of May 31st, right here at the Crest Center.
Really excited about
Oh
this.
my gosh.
Yes.
Carlos.
Yes.
And one of the things I love so much about you is you're a yes person.
Yes, I am.
Like me. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And that's freeing.
Yeah.
That's an element of freedom. It's the curiosity.
Sure.
It's the excitement. It's the, we're uninhibited by the fear and the things that once weighed us down. And saying yes, I had this vision that I would be speaking on stage with you one day. And I called and asked you, and there was it was yes. And even more beautifully is that all of the leaders who will be teaching, healers will be teaching this day, May 31st. Everyone said yes. And not only that, we all had the same date open, which is...
I know. Just works out.
Yeah,
Right.
when you get out of your own way.
Right.
Okay, so I think we could wrap it up with if we're going to get naked, we also have to get out of our own way.
Sure.
So getting naked is that place where you recognize we don't need that. You don't need to be part of this anymore.
Yeah.
You need to become the witness.
Right.
One of the teachers that I've been fortunate to study with, two have been very profound for me, Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late and great. He's constantly with me. I can hear him giggling right now that this is just even happening. And then Michael Singer, not a doctor, Michael Singer, who's just 2 hours from us.
Yeah.
And I get to go up and listen to him
Beautiful
often.
spirit. Yeah.
But both talk a lot about witnessing. And so you addressed it. We just didn't call it that. And you may hear some new language on here today. So if you're curious about the languaging, recognize that we give one word many meanings, like the word God.
Yeah.
One word, 8 billion meanings.
Right.
And recognizing that it's a personal journey. So whatever it means to you, honoring that meaning can also continue to evolve and change as you begin to transcend on this journey and love yourself more.
Totally.
And therein lies the fact that it becomes even more beautiful.
Yeah.
Because often you start down this journey not loving yourself, not liking that you get frustrated, not being okay with the fact that you feel tension all the time, and the world gave you labels to discuss what it is. You mentioned one earlier, toxic relationships. And I wanted to go back to that for a second because I don't use that language. And it's okay. When I heard you use it, it was, we use these words that we've associated with things to define them. And I think that almost boxes them in when the essence is whoever that other person is, who they are at their core is perfect too.
Yeah, I don't use that language either. It was more to reference how we normally speak about it.
Sure.
The truth is, and this, I'm sorry how it lands, but there's a real truth to it, so I can say it.
It's the Get Naked podcast.
Yeah. I mean, we don't end up in relationships like that out of nowhere.
Not at all.
Right. I'll always say this to somebody who's deeply confident and has a really strong sense of self-worth doesn't end up in toxic relationships. I've been in them, and I came to recognize that part of my being in them was my own sense of self-worth was highly damaged and not there. And so, the thing for me that I have really come to learn, Katrina, is that the more I've investigated myself, whether on a psychology level, on a meditation level, on a spiritual level, the more I understand humanity and the different...
Wait a minute, you see yourself in others?
Oh my goodness. Well, I see myself in others.
Beautiful?
And I see others in me.
Yeah. Oh.
Right?
And reciprocity.
Yeah. And so the deeper I get to know myself, the more I understand that I am simply a product of so many of the things that I have experienced in my life at this point, good and bad, no judgment whatsoever. And so if that's me, then that must stand that it's everyone else too. So when I see somebody showing up in ego, in personality, in anger, it's like, oh, this is simply a part of your programming that maybe you have come to see or not. That's okay, no judgment, right?
And it's not my job to make you see it.
No. But if I can be a vehicle, right? In Buddhism, they talk about this idea that out of emptiness arises compassion, right? That after we've worked on ourselves to rid ourselves of desire, aversion, anger, judgment, and we are empty, then out of that rises love and compassion. right? And
Our
so
original state.
our original state, right? And so healing doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're living now with more joy. No, it's that we're living with more freedom, right? For me, living a life of freedom means there's sadness, there's joy, there's anger, there's bliss, there's disappointment, there's grace. It's all there, and I don't have to get attached to any of it. Right?
Yeah.
And so for me, this like inner working is all about how can I be a more free being.
Oh, so we're going to sum that up because I just love that you wrapped it to here. Essentially, what we said in 2 hours was that when you were little, you were perfect love and you knew that. And then you adopted and attached to some ideas that were created by other people who had experiences, and you made deep meaning out of them about yourself and of others. And that became a very ingrained and believable story. And so you ran with that, and you weren't wrong. You weren't wrong. The awakening is when you begin to question, hey, is this the way I want to continue? And the invitation is there's another way. And it's
the
maybe,
the awakening I have found comes through yoga, plant medicine, spirituality, the Bible, trauma, right? It can come anywhere for people. Right?
There are many different paths.
So many different paths.
So many paths. So which one's the right one?
There is no right one.
Exactly.
It's the one
Did
that
you hear what he
speaks to you,
said?
right?
There's one that calls to you.
Yeah, listen.
There's one calling to you, and it is within you. And when you're still and silent, it'll show up.
Yes.
And it's your invitation. And so this is what our Fearless and Free Summit is. It's an invitation for you to come and be with you. We're not your teachers. We're not your gurus. We don't have your answers, or we are your teachers. Each one teaches, has
we
someone
have a story
to teach.
Share about our own paths.
Sure.
And maybe you can identify with some piece of it, which will be the thing you need for your next step in your journey.
Of course, the little seed, the little seed that gets planted. But I always like to say in our community in Awaken Fit, I don't have your answers. So if you're coming into this community looking for that, you're going to be sorely disappointed, but you have your answers. And you spoke about like this space of empowerment, and that is what I have found. And I think that's probably been what's more beautiful than anything, is that I'm so capable of so many things that I had no idea I was. Because I believed the storied self. And because of the storied self, I lived in that little box of limitations, lies, and the lack that held me back from proceeding forward. And I think if you asked any human, 9 out of 10 would say, I don't want to be here, but I really don't know. I don't have the language yet for where I want to be. And I'll tell you what that language is after I said I don't have your answer. At the essence of it, it's love. I just want to return to love. And that, again, that one word, we have polarized and dissected, and we've tried to attach it to genders and colors and symbols to use it as a tool of division, but love never divides, just like love never takes. And so we're just on May 31st going to hold space for love to be what is the felt and collective experience, because I think you and I and lots of others and you listening have identified that what we really want is just to share love, because as Dr. Wayne Dyer says, we've done enough sharing mind viruses. Yeah.
This morning, as I was leaving the house, my wife was standing outside with my son, who's 2. And he says, I love you, Daddy. I said, I love you too, buddy. He says, be careful, Daddy. I said, you be careful too, buddy. I'll see you later. No one taught him that. Be careful, right? Like that comes from the place that we're so deeply wired for that connection and love. And it was just this moment of reflection. There was such peace that came over me in that moment. Like, that's who we are.
That's who we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to do this path with you, friend.
Likewise.
Oh,
Likewise.
I'm glad to be doing it with you as well. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for getting naked with us. 17 years ago, I hated who I was. I took all my clothes off shortly after giving birth to my daughter, and I did 100 naked jumping jacks. That began the awakening. So I invite you, if you're a woman listening, man, it doesn't matter anymore, the gender. Return to your nudity. You're beautiful there. And if you've had a hard time looking in the mirror, find the connection there, and you'll find it in the world, in the bare essence of who you are. Because I know, and I know Dr. Carlos will tell you the same, who you are is perfect. Who you are is holy. Who you are is divine. And we're just here to hold space for you to remember that as we're remembering ourselves. Thanks for getting naked with me.
Thank you.
Yeah.